We like to believe the classic albums are lightning in a bottle, that they just happen. But when you actually take the time and zoom out, most of the albums that we have come to understand as legendary are the exact opposite of accidents. They're usually decisions. Someone somewhere sat down and said, "This is who I'm going to be now." Today, we're breaking down three albums that I love so much and I can talk about endlessly: Ed Sheeran's Multiply, Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour, and Taylor Swift's 1989. These three albums are very crucial to my lore because back in 2014 when they came out, and they all came out in 2014, I listened to these albums endlessly and they really inspired how I would structure my songwriting as well as educating me on how to make music, especially popular music. And these albums specifically, I want to talk about today because they did not just succeed, they became permanent rerouters of the careers of the artists who made them. Not because of the sound alone, but because of the strategy that they were used to create the albums. This is Losing the Plot, and this episode is about the blueprint of a blockbuster. I think I'm going to make this a series. I think I'm going to, like, from time to time take either one album or take a couple of albums and dissect them together. So I think I will make the series the blueprint of a blockbuster, dissecting the legendary pop album. So for today, we're doing three together, which is quite a task. I'm going to do my best to, not be too general and be as specific as I can with each album. But obviously, it's three albums and they're three big albums. And like I said, these are albums I know front and back, so I can talk about them all day. But I will try my best to just take out the points I want to make about what makes these albums legendary. And yes, of course, and if I feel like I want to, like, if I listen to this back and feel like I have more things to say, I'll make another episode about each album individually. But I really wanted to talk about them together because, like I said, I think I was 17 when they came out, and I remember listening to them top to bottom. And for me, these three albums are no skips, and they're all structured so nicely. And because of how integral they were to my understanding of music at the time, I really used them to understand songwriting and production more. Now, these albums happen in different points of the career of the artists who made them. So, In the Lonely Hour is Sam Smith's debut album. Multiply is Ed Sheeran's second album, and 1989 is Taylor Swift's, I believe, fifth album at that time. She was really putting those records out, man. So they come at different points in time for the different artists, and I think that definitely influences the direction that each artist takes the albums with. I think that matters. All these three albums only dropped in 2014, but they kind of were dropped within 5 months of each other, and I think that the timing of when they dropped as well is important. So let me not get ahead of myself too much. Let's start like I normally start. Like I started last episode with. I want to start with a thesis for this episode, and my thesis is that even though these albums all sound completely different, they are answering the same question: how do I become undeniable? So I would say that for Sam Smith, he chose focus. Ed Sheeran chose expansion, and Taylor Swift chose reinvention. And the episode will break that down. So I think I'm going to start with Sam Smith only because Sam Smith's album started out sorry. Sam Smith's album is the first album of the batch to be released. So it's not only their debut album, but it's also, just in terms of the calendar year, the first album that comes out. It comes out on 26 May 2014. And I didn't know this before doing research for this episode, but apparently when Sam Smith's album came out, it came out to lukewarm reviews, which is so interesting to me. I think that if they released In the Lonely Hour later in their career, it definitely wouldn't come out to lukewarm reviews. I really do believe that critics listen to records with knowledge of the artist's being, and that is, that is what it is. But I'm really surprised that it was released to lukewarm reviews, only because, apart from the fact that I liked it so much, there were a lot of hit singles on it. This is the album that has Money on My Mind, Stay With Me, which is probably the most famous song on that album. I'm Not the Only One, Like I Can and Lay Me Down. Lay Me Down also being another really important song for Sam Smith's career. So I was really surprised that this album was received lukewarmly when it first came out in 2014. But I think let me start by going down the track list. So I believe, in my humble opinion, that the first song on this album is Money on My Mind, and I feel like it's a false start. I don't think the album starts with Money on My Mind. Money on My Mind, in my mind's eye, would have been a better like bonus song. I'm really surprised that they started the album out with Money on My Mind, but I'm sure there was a reason why. But in my opinion, the album starts with Good Thing. Now, I should probably talk about what the album is about. So the album is about unrequited love. So they go through a relationship, or I'm not sure if it's a relationship, but they have feelings for someone, and the person doesn't reciprocate the relationship. And I believe this happens when they're about like 21 years old. So the album is really sad. It's not there's no light on this album. There's no light on this album. If you're looking for, oh, like there'll be one song, nope, it's 10 songs of sadness. Money on My Mind is the only song on this album that is, I would say, is upbeat the right word? I'm not sure if upbeat is the right word, but it's kind of removed from the other conversations or songs on the album. So all the other songs on the album, which is why I think Money on My Mind is a false start. Money on My Mind is about, obviously, Sam making music because they're not making music for money. They're making music for the love of money. They're making music for the love of music, not for the love of money. And so to me, it's a false start. The album really, to me, starts with Good Thing. And anyone that has listened to the album, Good Thing starts out with these massive strings that swell into a guitar. And I remember the first time I heard Good Thing, I was like, whoa. Because I think before then I had a vision, or I had an idea like of starting a song in a similar fashion. So hearing them do it, I was like, wow, this is actually phenomenal. But yeah, Good Thing starts the album. I think Good Thing is a great album starter, which is why I think Money on My Mind is a false start. Good Thing really works on setting down the thesis of the album, which is, this person doesn't love you back. This person doesn't love you. And you need to wake up from this dream of this person writing and who's going to love you. And then the cool thing about In the Lonely Hour by Sam Smith is that they are not afraid of staying in the emotion for too long, and they were able to make a career out of that. So for your debut album, most people may be scared that they will start an album that is too sad, and they talk about this a lot in the interviews they did around that same time, where people are like, this album is really, really sad, and they were like, yeah, I wrote the album when I was sad, and I'm not afraid to stay in this emotion too long. Maybe one day, hopefully I will feel better and I'll feel happy and I can make happier music, but this is about the moment that I was in, and I was really sad in that moment. And I find that to be quite seminal, because of how Sam is able to use vulnerability so strongly very early in their career. And what makes this album also stand out to me, and it reminds me a lot of Adele's 21, is that while the album is about heartbreak and relationship, it doesn't stay in one direction. Sam is able to really explore all the different ways you can feel, and all the different ways you can try to get someone to love you that doesn't love you back. So in another people's hands, this album or this theme can be very buried and very redundant. But in Sam's hands, songwriting wise and production wise, is so clever. So good thing to me is the real start of the album. The second song on the album, then Stay With Me, obviously. Live Your Lover, seminal. I'm Not the Only One. I've told you now was the song that I listened to, I think, probably the most on this album when it came out. I Told You Now and then Good Thing were the two songs that really, really, really that I was like, yo, I want to be able to write songs like this. And then of course there was Like I Can, Life Support, Not in That Way, Lay Me Down. Lay Me Down obviously being a seminal, like Lay Me Down is just a great song in general. So that's kind of the track list and all my recollection of the track listing. And what makes so again, the thesis of this episode is that we want to talk about the fact that great albums don't just come into being, that great albums are made to be great. So Sam chose focus. So in my theory is that going into making this again, this is his debut album, their debut album. They wanted to say, okay, I really feel these emotions, and this is where authenticity comes in. Is that there are some times that people, an artist will go on a press junket before their album comes out and say, my next album is going to be about the political state of the world, and da 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 and da 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 da. But because they don't really live that life and they don't walk that walk, you listen to the album, you're like, where is the political state of the world on this album? Or some people will be like, oh, my next album is going to be so personal, so vulnerable, da 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 da. And then you hear the album and you're like, where is the person? Like, where is the vulnerability in the room with us? Because I don't hear it. I don't hear her. She's not here. But that's because they're not in the authentic truth. They're not writing the songs from a place of authenticity, which is what Sam does so well here in The Lonely Hour. You can tell that they really went through all these stories, and the lyrics are they're hard hitting, and I think that really works. So my theory is that they went into this album making process with, okay, I'm going to tell an authentic story, but I want to focus on staying in an emotion, on an emotion, no matter how vulnerable, no matter how sad it is, and they do that for the entire album. And I will say also that "Lay Me Down" is a great way to end an album. I really miss when albums were just 10 songs. This is just a little rant. Like I'm looking at the runtime of In the Lonely Hour, the standard edition is 32 minutes, 10 songs. Honestly, like I guess because of streaming has really changed how we consume music and how people put music out. But give me a nice 10 song album, 32 45-minute long album with an average of 3 minute songs on there, and I'm good. Like some of the best albums are really in that 10-12 song pack, and we don't really have those anymore. But I digress. Again, losing the plot. Back to In the Lonely Hour. One thing that I have to mention about In the Lonely Hour, apart from the production of the songs in general, is the vocal production, and I really want to lean into the vocal production as a performance on here, because it would have been very easy, and I'm thinking again of Adele's 21 when I say this. It would have been very easy for Sam to belt out the songs in a very, I don't know, when people are singing about heartbreak, especially when it's R&B and pop influence, there is a tendency to be very loud and brass about it, and very, I'm heartbroken, so I'm going to belt. But Sam's vocal choices, I think just by design, I think it's just something that they like in music, is very restrained, and it really brings out something about someone being vulnerable. It's like kind of like they are holding tears back as they tell you the story of why this person hurt them, which to me is usually a more powerful performance, even in acting, when you're trying to tell someone, I'm hurt, I'm heartbroken, and this is why, but you are so heartbroken that you are struggling to say it, as opposed to the blatant wailing. Now, the wailing has its moments, and I think, like I would say, Lay Me Down is a moment where there is a bit of wailing, but because of the way Sam sings, that head voice mix that he does, they do, is very, it just works. It just works on so many levels on this album. So the vocal production always gets to me. It's that you hear the breath, you hear the restraints. Now again, there's really good singing on here, and I think that's something that gets conflated most times, is that people think that to show that you're a really good singer, you have to wail, you have to do all the runs and all the ad libs. Everybody cannot be Brandy, and not because everybody can't be Brandy. Even Brandy is a pretty, Brandy's probably a wrong example to use, because Brandy is also a very restrained singer. I would say everybody cannot be. Let me not call anybody's name. You know what? Let me shut up. But my point is, you don't need to wail to show us that you're heartbroken. I think restraint is even more powerful. The takes feel intentional on this record, and nothing is oversold. And the way the mixing works on In the Lonely Hour, Sam's voice is in front of the mix, so all the instrumentation and the production is very subtle. There are things happening. They have more of an atmospheric ambience, and I will say, part of my theory of what, in general, not just for this episode, but in general, of what makes a classic album is that classic albums don't sound like they were made in the period of that they were made. because of use of live instrumentation. Now, there's not a use of live instrumentation all around on this record, but most of it sounds like something that you can get a garage band to play, and I feel like it really elevates the sound, and it also makes that anytime that you go back to listen to the record, it doesn't sound like it was made in 2014, because 2014 has a very specific sound. If you know, there was a sound that everybody was going for in 2013, 2014, and this album doesn't sound like it comes from that era because of the choice of using more live instrumentation. Now, I've talked about the track listing earlier, and now I think Money on My Mind is a false start, and the album just has to be a good thing. But I will say that for an album that talks about the same theme from top to bottom, it's paced very well. I have a bias to the album because I really love the album, and I've listened to the album since it came out, which is now going to be 10 years, which is kind of crazy to say. But it's paced really well. The songs are not too long. Deep Negro sigh. The songs are not too long. The songs are not all 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Because I know the short song camp are about to start waving their flags. And I'm not with you, 2 minutes, 30-second songs. I'm not with y'all. No. But the songs are not too long, because sometimes, again, with people that want to go for making classic albums or making heartbreak albums, now we have a 5-minute song and you're saying the same thing for 10 verses. What's that about? Can you pull up a seat? Can you see me in my office? Okay? You've told us in the first verse that they don't want you. You told us in the second verse that even though they don't want you, you want them back. In the bridge, if you have a bridge, because y'all don't make bridges no more. Can we? And again, the podcast is called Losing the Plot. Right? Let me lose the plot for 10 seconds. What happened to the bridges, y'all? What happened to the bridges? Where are the bridges? In the songs that y'all are putting out in recent history, where are the bridges? Songs don't have bridges anymore. And this really, really gets to, like, nope. What? All I can do, I'm lost for words. Again, I'll get back to the point. I'll get back on track in a few seconds. But let me get this rant out. My theory for why songs don't have bridges, I have a lot of theories. I'm not sure if you've noticed. My theory for why songs don't have bridges anymore is because people don't know how to sing anymore. Oh, who said that? Who said that? Who said that? Who said that? Who would say that? Y'all can't sing anymore. It's because the point of a bridge is to elevate the song and take us from the verse, chorus to a new height, to elevate the chorus. But if you don't have if you don't have a vocal, if y'all don't have the pipes and the vocal coaching to sustain notes and belt, then y'all can't sing a bridge. And I think that's why we don't have bridges anymore. I know a lot of people say streaming and people want songs to be shorter than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I think, yeah, there's this place for that, but there's also a place for, your bridge won't make sense if your bridge doesn't elevate the song. Back in the day, with the Whitney Houstons and the Mariah Careys, that bridge meant a key change. Yeah, it meant a sustained note that's going to take the bridge, a sustained note from the bridge into the new chorus, into 2 more choruses of ad-libbing. But y'all can't sing no more. And for the life of me, I'll never understand why people whose jobs is making music and singing specifically and have all these resources to them available don't take the vocal classes and learn how to sing so they can sing bridges. I have finished digressing. Let me get back on point. Losing the Plot podcast. I'll keep reminding you guys whenever I go on these tangents that title is very intentional. So back to album pacing. I think the album pacing of In the Lonely Hour is immaculate, and another point to take away for why this is a legendary album to me. Oh, I should have started with that. These are legendary albums to me. I think that of all these albums here, actually, I think 1989 and Multiply are regarded as seminal pop albums. It is my shock that In the Lonely Hour was received to lukewarm critical reception. But I think since that time, I think these three albums would be recognized as legendary pop albums. So to me, but I think by the music community at large as well. Um, I know I've talked about Adele's 21 earlier. Another album that In the Lonely Hour kind of reminds me of, not sonically, but in theme and in intention. Because the intention, again, my thesis is that this album being so vulnerable and so focused is intentional, and that's why it's a legendary album to me. Scissors Control comes to mind as well. Scissors Control is also Scissors' debut album. Control is also Scissors' debut album, and Control is way more zany than In the Lonely Hour, meaning that it's more experimental. It feels just like an alien dropped a pack of music on Earth and we found it. But in its focus and its intention and its allegiance to being a spectacle of vulnerability, it does the same thing. It does that same thing of, I want to stay in this emotion for a while. And Scissor says, Scissor reviews some things that obviously people go through and most people won't share. And she's not afraid to stay in that. And Control is, well, not just by me, by the R&B community, by popular music, is going to be regarded as a seminal piece of work because of that. And again, the point of this is that this doesn't happen by mistake. So if you're an artist and you're thinking about, okay, I want to make a seminal album, you can choose focus. You can choose to be inward. You can choose one emotion and build a world around that emotion. But let it be an emotion that you are that's actually authentic to your reality and something you've actually gone through. Let's pivot. Okay, so I think that's all I'll say about Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour, because I just feel like, one last thing I want to mention about this is that I want to talk about these albums in order of when they came out. So Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour came out in May, I believe. Let me just double check, confirm that, so I'm not lying to you all. Yes, so In the Lonely Hour came out on 6 May 2014. I think something to note here is that as we go down these albums, the albums are released later in the year as the artists, in proportion to the artist's status. What I mean by that is that In Lonely Hour is released by Sam Smith. This is Sam Smith's debut album. Sam Smith is a newcomer in the industry. Newcomers in the industry generally want to get their music out early in the year because the heavy hitters are going to drop later in the year. So Sam drops in May, Ed Sheeran drops in June, and Taylor Allison Swift dropped in October. I think Taylor has a thing for October releases. So my point is, you can see that where Sam was in 2014 was not where Ed was not where Taylor was. And Taylor in this line of artists is the biggest artist at this time in history, and she drops the latest. And that's not a coincidence, because you kind of want to save later in the year for heavy hitters because they have more fans and it will be received more. Plus, another thing as well is that for a newcomer, for a new artist, and I this is again my theory, and I promise to always let you guys know when something is my theory and know when it's not. But this is my theory, is that as a new artist, you don't need let me rephrase that. As a new artist, post release promotion is more important than pre-release promotion, because you don't have the base to be able to propel your pre-release. So what I mean by that is that Taylor Swift took the entire year. The promotion for 1989 can be an episode of its own. It can be its own episode, and maybe I will do that one day. But the release and strategy for 1989 took an entire year to do. They started promoting this record from after she finished the last one, essentially. So it took almost a year for the album to release and for it to be rolled out. So for Sam being I'm not sure when Sam's release started, but my point is it makes more sense for Sam to put out their record earlier in the year at that point in their career because of where they were, and it makes sense for Taylor to put hers out a bit later. So we can pivot now to one Ed Sheeran. What's Ed's full name? Is it Edward? Edward Christopher Sheeran. Yeah. Edward Christopher Sheeran is the next artist that I will be discussing. Multiply is such a special album to me. I really love this album. I think the most impressive thing about Multiply isn't that Ed Sheeran worked with the big names that he got to work with. It's that even after working with big name producers like Pharrell and Rick Rubin, he still sounds like himself. He still sounds like the guy guy with the guitar on the street corner. For context, Multiply is Ed Sheeran's sophomore album, like I mentioned before. So his first album has introduced us to him as this singer-songwriter, guitar guy who, busks. I think that was the general vibe of him, and it was also very folk pop. The songwriting and the production, everybody knows A-Team, or if you don't know A-Team, you should know A-Team. But that was pretty much the vibe of Ed Sheeran. And what he does with Multiply is that he takes that sound and he elevates it. He takes that sound and he makes it bigger than him in many ways. It becomes a real pop sound. So he goes from this indie sound to this pop juggernaut, and Multiply is the album that does that for him. And another reason why I think that these legendary albums are made with intention, because he could have made another Plus, which is his debut album. He could have made another Plus album easily, but the decision to take his tried and tested formula and find a way to make it bigger, I think really serves him here and would lay the framework for how he will be received by audiences moving forward. So one of the things that I find very cool about Multiply is once again the track listing. Track listing is very important, you guys. Just to take a tangent, I know there's some people amongst us who honestly, I don't know how y'all do this, but y'all don't listen to albums in the order that the artist put it on your first listen. Very criminal offense, because musicians go through a lot of work musicians that care go through a lot of work to track list their albums in a specific order so you can get a specific story. Ed Sheeran's Multiply does that so well, because what happens as the track list evolves is that he kind of adds a new layer of production to every song. So one starts out with just his voice and guitar. Then I'm a Mess is voice, guitar, we have some percussion. Sing is produced by Pharrell Williams, so Sing gets huge. Sing is a really big pop song. But then we go back to Don't, and then we keep adding layers, Nina, and then Photograph. Like all these songs, increasingly at the base is a voice, a guitar, and some percussion. But as the album proceeds, they get bigger and they verge into different lanes. Sometimes he leans into hip-hop influences, sometimes he leans into R&B influences, sometimes he leans even stronger into the folk influences. But it's just a great example of taking a sound and the fact that you can be a focused musician but still expand on your sound. And that's my theory for Ed Sheeran's album. I think Ed chose expansion to make his album legendary. The songs I love on this album, I love all the songs on this album. Again, 12 songs, 50 minutes. Now, Ed Sheeran is a singer-songwriter, so his songs average 4 minutes. So a lot of the songs are reaching the 4 minutes mark. I would say very well deserved on this record. But my favorite songs on this album, it's hard to say. I'll say one. One is a great album, like a great opening for an album. It just works. Like it just hooks you. It's just him and it's just the guitar, but wow, it works. And then there's this really nice note he holds in the bridge, which again, just great. I'm a Mess, which is after one, another song that I really love. I'm gonna skip over to Bloodstream. I think Bloodstream has such great production. Just like in your headphones, it's a song. Bloodstream is definitely like one of those headphone songs. It's really effective in production in how it's produced. Runaway was my favorite song on this album for the longest time. I just I love how it feels to me that Ed is singing at the top of his range here. I could be wrong, but to me, it felt like he was singing at the top of his range, and just the tension between the guitar and his singing just really, really worked for me. Now, there's a song called "I See Fire," which is on the deluxe edition of the album, which Ed wrote for the Hobbit soundtrack, I believe. And I See Fire is also just a really great song. It's not really an album song because it's a song from a track list from a soundtrack for a movie, but I See Fire I highly recommend. So let's go back to talking about Ed Sheeran making this legendary album and focusing on expansion. I would say that his debut album was Ed Sheeran proving that he could write really good songs. Ed has a great ear for catchy melodies and telling stories. And I think Multiply is the second album was him proving that those songs could scale. Multiply is not a plus part two. He didn't remake his debut album, he expanded. And one of the ways he did that was why he owned his core music and sonic identity. He leans more into blending other genres into it, with like hip hop. Take It Back is a great example of him blending hip hop into what he can do. R&B, his voice just has that, he can lean into that R&B bag when he wants to, and he does. And obviously there's pop funk on this as well. So I think the lesson here is that every artist should learn to steal, but still have an ownership of their own sound. Because a song like Sing, which is very obviously produced by Pharrell, doesn't, the Pharrellness of the production of Sing does not get bigger than Ed. Does that make sense? Because Pharrell is one of those producers that it's very easy to get lost in the source of this is a Pharrell song versus this is an Ed Sheeran song that Pharrell produced. It can easily be a Pharrell song that Ed Sheeran sings versus an Ed Sheeran song that Pharrell produced. It's an Ed Sheeran song that Pharrell produces because Ed Sheeran stays on top of it with his references, with his vocal delivery, with just his knowledge of his own artistic signature. And I think that's very important. And then a song like Don't, where he's leaning more into R&B, again, he has such a great knowledge of what makes him Ed Sheeran that when he mixes other genres into it, we don't get lost in the source. So I would say that the lesson here is that for musicians, before you go into dabbling, and we know everybody likes to genre bend and work with big names and whatever, make sure you really have a good knowledge of your own core sound and your core identity so that you don't get lost in the source of someone else's artistic vision for you, and it stays true to you, because your listeners would be able to tell when it seems like, okay, this is what's happening here. It will just stick out in a way that's not best. I don't think. I want to talk about Ed Sheeran's busking history for a little bit, because to me that's the core of Ed Sheeran's sound. Even when he tours right now, he tours and he just it's just him and his guitar and his pedal. He has a really nice pedal, obviously very expensive pedal, but you think at the scale of someone like Ed Sheeran, who is so big and has all these records and has made all this money, he wants to with a full band. But no, Ed tours the way he started making music, busking. And I feel like that training of busking really helped him nail his skill, hone his craft. And when he came up busking, he was playing hours on the street, winning people over with nothing but his voice and his guitar. And that discipline, you hear that discipline over this album. I think I've said it like 1,000 times at this point. His voice and his guitar and some percussion. That is the core of Ed Sheeran's sound. And I think on this album, I feel like on later albums, it starts to get dicey. It starts to get, interesting. But on this album, that is the core of it. And he's able to keep to it, because even at the biggest songs on Multiply, it never feels tired, it never feels gimmicky, it never feels overplayed. That voice and guitar persona, he finds new ways to make it interesting. Another thing I love about this album, I think Bloodstream is my favorite. When I think about mixing and mastering, on this album, I think Bloodstream is my favorite. But throughout the record, the vocal production and the production of the record is so clean. The beats, again, these songs don't sound like they were made in 2014 to me. They sound timeless to me, because again, the core of the record is live instrumentation. It's not just beats of the time or production of the time. It's production that works and production that will work even if the album was even if the album was released today. What I love about this album is how it builds. I think I've mentioned this again with the track listing from song to song. It builds very well, and yeah. So we talked about um, Sam Smith earlier. I said that Sam Smith that they chose focus to make a legendary album. They looked inward and they said, "I'm looking inward, and I'm looking at a vulnerable moment with a lot of emotions, and I'm going to focus on that, and I'll make a legendary album with that." Ed Sheeran did the opposite, where Ed Sheeran focused outward and said, "I know my craft, I know my work, but I want to expand it because I know that even no matter who I work with, I'll be able to keep the core of my music and keep the core of my sound, and I'll be able to take these busking songs that I play on the street corner for people and make them into songs that can fill entire stadiums." And that is how we transition to the third album of today, Taylor Allison Swift's 1989. You know, I just okay. I think that there is a reason why we like to talk about Taylor Swift a lot as a culture, and I think it's because Taylor reflects back to us where we are as a culture, and sometimes we don't like those things that we see, and there are times when we do, and I think 1989 is an example of when we do. If I'm not mistaken, Michael Jackson's Thriller album, Michael Jackson went into making Thriller, saying that he was going to make a pop album that would be undeniable and was going to win a bunch of Grammys. It was he. Sometimes I feel like there's an with musicians and people that are music purists, there is an over fixation on making an album for the art of making the album, as if you decide to make an album like if you decide to make an album of bangers, that makes the album less good or less strong because your motive was to make bangers. Sometimes, you know, if you want to make a banger, say you want to make a banger and go make a banger. Because that was Michael Jackson's, when Michael Jackson went into Thriller, he was very determined to make the album that they made. Thriller did not become the best selling album of all time. By coincidence, it was designed to be so, and that's the exact same thing that happened with Taylor Swift in 1989. Before 1989, Taylor Swift released her fourth album, Red, and if you were there, you know the discourse at the time was that the Red was released while Taylor went under the identity of being a country artist. And a lot of critics and fans, I guess, as well, or listeners were like, "Hey, Miss Mamas, I knew you were trouble. It's not a country song." And her whole thing was like she wanted to do a bit of country and a bit of pop. But the biggest songs on that record, which are, I would say, "I Knew You Were Trouble," we are never ever getting back together, were the pop songs. So while I think Red is a good album, the sonic disparity between her country persona and the pop songs on the record made this album, I would say, received interestingly. So I think the law goes that at the Grammys, she didn't win a Grammy for Red. So at the Grammy event for at the Grammy where she did not win a Grammy for Red, she said that she was going to make an album that was going to be blatantly pop. So she said, "You know what? You guys are right. I'm not doing half country, half pop no more. I'm ready to become a pop star." Big, you know, very big a thing to say and a thing to plan to do, because Taylor will not be the first country artist to have pop moments, but not all country artists that have pop moments translate into mega pop stars or the greatest pop star of our time. Now let me take a beat there. Y'all are gonna want to fight me. Y'all are gonna want to fight me. But when I say Taylor Swift is the greatest pop star of our time, I'm talking specifically about the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Check the scoreboard. Because I feel like people when you make statements like that, people get up in arms and say, "What about this person? I'm not. Listen. I'm saying I'm talking about numbers wise. The Eras tour is the highest grossing tour of all time. If like everything that Taylor does she has done in the past 5 years has been the of all time. That qualifies her to be the greatest pop star. Like, do you get what I'm saying? I'm not talking about whatever else other people's metrics might be. Numbers wise, nobody's seen Taylor in the bank. She became a billionaire solely off of music. Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Check the scoreboard. So when I say things like that, please don't throw stones, don't throw tomatoes. This is a safe space for love and community. I'm just saying, I'm looking at the numbers, and these numbers say that Taylor Allison Swift is the biggest pop star of all time. Now you can get into whatever else you want to get into, but I'm saying in the bank and on the charts, nobody's seen Mama. Nobody is seeing Miss Mamas. Nobody. And when I say nobody, I mean the space between her and the next person is wide, honey. Is wide. Is wide. And I feel like I really want to do a Taylor Swift episode. There's so many things to talk about when it comes to Taylor Swift, and so many ways to talk about it that I feel like my thoughts are not fully formed. Like I have a lot of things to say, but I really want to say them in a very constructive way. But let's get back to 1989. 1989, however, is the album that, in my opinion, sets Taylor on track to being the greatest pop star of all time. That pivot from, you know what, I'm not gonna do just country. I want to make a pop record. And I want it to be the best pop record to ever exist. It really does change the trajectory of her career, because she's already a really great songwriter, and I think that kind of like what Ed Sheeran did in a different way though. So Ed Sheeran chose expansion, Taylor chose reinvention. So reinvention is such an interesting word to use to describe Taylor Swift in 1989, because Taylor Swift's country records were already pop adjacent, if that makes any sense. So it's sonically, it's not a crazy jump, if we're being honest. Like, You Belong With Me, Love Story, they already have pop sensibilities. Speak Now, really great Taylor Swift album, Speak Now. Again, it's a country record, but it's the pop is in the air there. It's just not at the door. And I think but what changes though is that there is a way that a pop star carries themselves, which I think is why one day I might do an episode about the rollout for 1989 and why that's important. But there is a way a pop star carries themselves. There is a way that a pop star releases music that Taylor leans into here. And one of the critiques of 1989 is that it is maybe her most impersonal album, and I don't. That's such an interesting thing to say. It's just a critique I've seen that compared to her other records, there's a very general vibe on 1989, because again, it's a pop record. You want it to relate to as many people as possible. I think her fans, those that listen to her music, might have a different understanding of that. I think that, like, if you know her lore personally, you will know that these songs are not super general. They're like, if you want to go down a rabbit hole on Pinterest or Twitter or whatever, you can find out who these songs are about. But 1989 exists because Red was in that country, not pop, and Taylor decided to go in to make a pop album fully, and she does that. Why 1989? If you know that Taylor Swift was born in the year 1989, and the sonic references for the album is 1980s pop. So what they do here is they kind of were inspired by how drum machines and synth production, synths on this album, just immaculate. And they reinvent them, they bring them up to speed of the 20th 21st century. What else I want to say about say about that is that I talked before about how I think that an album can sound dated if it uses beats rather than live instrumentation production. 1989 will stand as an exception to that rule for me, because it's not like most of this album is drum machines and synths and things of that nature, and even more than that, it's even an album that is clearly influenced by another period of time, right? However, the songwriting and just the way they treat the challenge of reinventing a specific sound from a specific era is just so elevated. It's just an elevated album. It's like an elevated pop experience. And I think that that's what makes this album timeless. So I would say that while it doesn't have live instrumentation all through, it's still timeless to me. Like, I think that I she could make this album today, and it would. I wish she would make this album today, actually. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to address that, because I know I mentioned with In the Lonely Hour and Multiply that they were very live sounding. But this one is a lot of beats, honestly, but it's again elevated, so it's not just beats of 2014. Again, these are beats that are inspired by the 1980s, so that already makes it timeless. So moving into her wanting to make bangers. You know what's funny? My service has an album called Bangers, which we'll ask about bangers one day, but for a different reason. Anyways, back on losing the plot, back on track. Going into an album trying to make hits usually fails, but Taylor commits completely, and I think that's a very important thing about Taylor Swift's career in general, but especially on this album, is that when Taylor says that this is the concept, she means this is the concept. So 1989 is placed in New York, so she doesn't just place the album in a time, in a year. She actually places it in a location, right? So that level of just commitment to the work allows you to say, oh, this won't fit, this will fit, this is who we have to work with, this is who we don't have to work with. And down from the visuals to the music and everything, it really, the level of commitment here ties everything together. Let me talk about the track listing really, really quickly. So 1989 has 13 songs on the standard track listing. If you know Taylor, you know that Taylor's lucky number is 13. She was born on December 13, 1989, and 13 she has a lucky number 13. So this album has 13 songs. It's her lucky number. This album is also 48 minutes and 41 seconds long for the standard track listing, for the standard album, not the deluxe album. Now, this is one of those albums where 1989 is just such a huge album that, like, even the deluxe edition songs are bangers and they are very popular. So the deluxe edition songs are Wonderland, I can't even believe that Wonderland was not even on the original track list, because Wonderland is seminal. You Are in Love, I think, is one of Taylor Swift's best lyrically written songs. I just want to put that out there. New Romantics, she literally starts. I think she starts her no, she doesn't start the tour with New Romantics, but New Romantics also, if it's a huge song. But these are deluxe edition songs, and they're still like literally bangers. To let you know how much they were in the still cooking up this pop music. This is such a great pop album, honestly. Welcome to New York is an okay starter. I sometimes I really like, sometimes I don't. It's one of those, Ryan Tedder co-wrote it, which is what it is. Blank Space is the second song on the album. Blank Space, I mean, Blank Space. Blank Space. I will say that whenever I hear Blank Space, I hear Lord. It reminds me a lot of Royals, which is really random. But when I think of Blank Space, I think of Royals by Lord. Something about those two songs, they feel like sister songs to me. And then knowing that I think Taylor and Lord were friends at the time, that kind of makes sense to me. Style is a beautiful song. Style is such a pretty headphone song. Like, the production is immaculate. Taylor's vocal production on this entire record is just chef's kiss. It's a treat. Out of the Woods is my favorite song on this album, and I want to say that I think Out of the Woods is the best song on this album. In my opinion, production wise, lyric, the song sounds like chaos, and then she writes. The lyrics match the production matches the lyrics, which match the vocal. Like, it's just 10 over 10 for, I think Out of the Woods is just like the best song on the album. in my opinion. Followed by I think I Know Places. I Know Places is another one where I'm like, see when there's. I will say again that one of the reasons why this album is not a legendary album by chance is the people that are working on this album are the like if you wanted to make a legendary pop album, these are the people that you would work with. Ryan Tedder. Ryan Tedder is just a pop hit maker. He wrote Halo by Beyonce. He also wrote Kelly Clarkson's, what song is that? Already Gone by Kelly Clarkson, amongst other like Ryan Tedder. Google Ryan Tedder. Ryan Tedder. Oh, Ryan Tedder is also a member of One Republic. He's the lead singer for that. But Ryan Tedder is a pop juggernaut. Max Martin and Shellback, like these are Britney Spears. What's the Justin Timberlake band group? Like, Greg Kirsten is on here. Nathan Chapman. Like, the people that she works on, it's not a big team. She works with a very select few people on this album. But again, if you want to make a legendary album for the genre that you want to make it legendary, that's something that you might want to work with. She worked with all of them, so it's 1989 being one of the biggest pop albums of all time is not a mistake in any way. Just like look at the credit listing, like yeah, that makes sense. All you had to do was stays interesting. It's it's an album song, and by that I mean like it's a deep cut. It's very like, again, I don't think there are any skips on this album, me personally, but like it's a very album song. Shake It Off was a massive single. I think most people know Shake It Off. I Wish You Would. I like I Wish You Would. But I would put it in the same category as All You Have to Do Was Stay, which is a very album song. Bad Blood. Now, Bad Blood has a crazy remix with one Kendrick Lamar, which is again one of the most random things to ever happen. But wow, Kendrick kills the remix. Wow. Wildest Dreams. I'll put Wildest Dream up with like Style. Just a pretty headphone song. The production is so lush, so clean. How You Get the Girl, again, I put out in the category of All You Have to Do Was Stay and I Wish You Would. I kind of group those together. Same with This Love. Just very album songs, but still good songs regardless. Clean. Clean reminds me of Ed Sheeran's Bloodstream. So in my mind, Clean by Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran's Bloodstream are sister songs. They have like similar vibes to me. Okay, so that's the track listing. Again, 13 songs on the regular track listing, 48 minutes, 41 seconds. I really wish we could get back to this 10, 12 songs. Or this 13 songs, but you get my vibe. I also think that I've talked about the album being just a work of specificity, and Taylor being specific about what she wanted, and she got what she wanted. I'm pretty sure 1989 won Album of the Year at the Grammys the year that it came out, because there was no way he was not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? So let's tie everything up together. Let's wrap this up. Again, my claim was that blockbuster albums they're not happenstance. Sometimes they are, but most times they're not. And these three albums, in my opinion, show artists specifically wanting success and wanting legendary status and going to get it with intention, but all having different ways and different theories of how they were going to do that. So Sam used definition and specificity and vulnerability and focus to achieve that. Ed Sheeran used scaling, owning his sound but scaling his sound up to do that. And Taylor used control and reinvention to do that. So these albums don't sound dated. They don't sound dated because they weren't chasing trends. They were chasing vision. They had very specific visions, and the artists who made them were building identities with them. So I hope that in this conversation that we've had, it's a very long episode, but I hope that you were able to I was able to convince you and not confuse you as to why these albums are legendary albums and why they are not legendary albums by happenstance. They are blockbuster albums because the people who made them wanted to make blockbuster albums. So the lesson isn't in the sound. I would say it is the audacity to choose a direction and commit to it. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Losing the Pub with Adeoluwa. Stay crowned, and I'll see you in the next episode.